Welcome everyone to our what is this? Episode 12? Episode 13. Sorry,
13, yeah.
episode 13 of the Eyes and Ears podcast where we talk about fun stuff that's home theater related, maybe, or maybe not. This week, though, is definitely a home theater related topic. Yeah, Gravity has been re-released on Blu-ray.
Yeah.
It's been out of print. The Diamond Lux edition has been out of print or unavailable for years, and the only way you could get it is either through paying an insane amount of money or a other nefarious means of acquiring said version. But no, you can now go buy it. I think it might be sold out on Amazon. Not 100% sure. But
No,
we're gonna
I think it's
still
still
on.
there.
Still on?
I'm pretty
Okay.
sure they ordered a bunch. Like literally, I was looking at my analytics for my Amazon affiliate links and stuff.
Yeah.
Because of course I put my affiliate link in my video talking about Gravity coming back on
Hmm.
Blu-ray. And so far, just my link alone has garnered about 175 purchases.
Yeah.
But physical media is you really don't get that good of sales when you're doing physical media, unfortunately. So
Right.
not like I made like so much money having all those, use my link. But thank you very much for any of those who did use my link. I'm going to put that out there right up front.
I did not.
Thanks.
Sorry. No. Now, okay, let me ask you this. Do you know if it's different at all from the transfer, either video or audio side, from the Diamond Lux edition? Or is it the same exact? Do you know if it's the same?
I don't know. It's the same cover.
Okay.
I mean,
I'm assuming it's
got to be
yeah.
because the Diamond Lux version had not only the Atmos but the silent space version as well, which is what this new re-release has on it.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine it's identical. They just got rid of the Diamond Lux moniker for whatever reason. So
yeah. Yeah. So Joel is here. Welcome, Joel. Thank you for joining. He said, thanks, Elon, for the heads up on the Gravity release. Ordered it right away. So
you're welcome,
awesome, Joel. And Jeffrey Fry is here. Welcome, Jeffrey. Thank you for joining us. Sorry we missed last week. Just a lot of stuff going on. But he says, sorry, Elon, I'm going to cross my fingers and wait for the 4K of Gravity. LOL. I have enough unwatched Blu-rays I still need to watch in the meantime. Jeffrey, I am right there with you. I so want a 4K version of this. I would love a 4K version of Gravity. The Blu-ray is okay. It's not the greatest. If I look at my Diamond Lux like remux that I made from the actual disc, the overall file is less than 20 gigabytes with the Atmos track and the video tracks. So I would love to have some. I might have to go back and double check that. It might be 27 gigabytes. Either way, there's a lot more room for improvement there. It's not it's not any compression or anything like that. It's just literally bit for bit the same thing. So yeah, it's kind of disappointing. It looks okay, but yeah, I would love them to go back, just like they're doing with Twister, and doing an actual 4K release.
Yes.
And we have a couple people. Go ahead.
I really am looking forward to Twister because, as I've said in previous streams and videos on my channel, the Turbine edition that you can get from Germany, which I own and you own as well, I believe.
Yes.
It is Blu-ray, but it is an Atmos track. But since it was filmed in the 90s, it was filmed on film. So usually any transfer that is, not any, but if they're really taking the time to do another like 4K native scan of anything on film, it can turn out to look so good. So
yeah, if it's handled properly.
Yeah.
Don't put Peter Jackson in charge of it. That's all I gotta say. Or
Right.
James Cameron for that matter. We don't
Yeah.
need all the anyway. Yeah, I'm really excited for Twister because the American version of Twister on Blu-ray, it's they were basically they use the same, not to get too off topic here. They use the same basically scan, transfer, whatever, when they created the DVD originally, I believe. So it's inherent with all of those issues. The detail isn't great. There's some weird resolution problems, not just because of the visual effects, but just overall, it's a very soft looking transfer. And what
Mhm.
I can say about the German import of Twister on just regular Blu-ray is it's miles ahead of what we have now in America.
Yes.
So, and that was, I believe, done in-house in Germany there, and I think they've done a new scan, Warner Brothers has, for the 4K, over here. They've done the scan here, so I'm really hoping, I just want the movie in as high as quality as possible. Don't go and, like, I don't need you to redo any effects or anything,
Yeah.
but I do wonder if it's gonna be the same Atmos mix as the German version, because I think we've talked about it before here. That's It's almost too active. It's a little
The the heights are
yeah,
loud.
yeah, yeah. Um, but with a couple people going back to Gravity, because that's kind of, I mean, it's not this stream isn't really about Gravity so much as it is just immersive audio mixes in general.
Yeah.
Really, uh, movies, but I also kind of want to touch on games a little bit because I played Hellblade 2 recently. I finished it, and I was nothing but disappointed with the audio presentation on a speaker system with that game. It
Oh, man.
feels very, very much in comparison to the first game.
Mm.
But we'll kind of touch on that in a bit. But a couple of people have mentioned the 3D copy of the Blu-ray, which is awesome. I'm glad that people are still making use of the 3D. I don't know if 3D will ever make a comeback, but who knows? I've always had problems with 3D myself just because glasses on top of glasses,
Mhm.
not the most comfortable. Uh, and contacts, I have astigmatism, so I don't see as well with contacts as I do with glasses. So blah blah blah. But yeah, 3D is still cool when I have seen it, and I imagine that there's that part in the very beginning of the Gravity where she's like unscrewing the bolt and the bolt flies out and George Clooney's character
Yeah.
kind of like moves forward and grabs it with his hand. I imagine that in 3D would be super cool. But
Oh,
also
yeah.
just the overall depth between like them and the earth and like seeing the distance. I think
Mhm.
I'm not a huge fan of like things that pop out. I like the screen to just kind of go deep into the I'm doing this like to the screen now. I think that's super cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really excited to kind of talk about this stuff here. Jeffrey also mentioned, because we were talking about the 4K version of Gravity, that I wholeheartedly agree that I think the HDR will make a difference with all the dark scenes,
Mhm.
and like there's a lot of highlights with like their suits, like the lights on their suits, especially in the beginning. Having that extra dynamic range definitely wouldn't hurt, especially if
Mhm.
it's like done right. But we'll see.
'Cause
We
you have the
shall
whole
see.
spectrum, because 'cause you've got the darkness of space, and then
Right.
you have the highlights of the sun shining on their suits, so it's like
Yeah, and all the shadow detail,
HDR.
because you essentially just have more in between,
Mhm.
right? Well, you have more maximum at the top end, but then you have a like much wider range in between. So
Yeah.
hopefully, I I I wouldn't be surprised if we do eventually get a 4K HDR version. I would love to see that.
Mhm.
I mean, we got a lot of other stuff. Um,
I'm still gonna buy it when
yeah.
it comes out on 4K for sure.
Hi, Craig. Thank you for joining.
Hi, Craig.
I don't know why I said it so quickly like that. Hi, Craig. Um, But yeah, yeah. Thanks for joining, Craig. We do have some questions here. I want to kind of touch on real quick.
Yep.
Kind of an update here from maybe Elon. I've not been successful in getting DTS out of Disney Plus yet. The I don't really have anything that supports IMAX Enhance, which it's just another fancy name for it's not lossy DT. Like anyway, I don't want to turn this into like a whole rant on that. I
Yeah.
haven't been successfully able to do it. I've been talking with Gene from Audioholics. Well, actually, he made a post on his uh, community tab on YouTube talking about Queen on Disney, which is one of the few DTSX, I suppose,
Yep.
mixes. And I don't think he's been successful in getting it either. So, yeah.
The only person I've talked to that has had success is Chris Boylan from Acoustics,
Okay.
only because he has already received a Sony Bravia 7 TV from Sony to review. So he's going to be doing a review on the TV alone, but he has successfully gotten DTSX to work on Disney Plus through the Disney Plus app on the Sony Bravia 7 to, I don't know, like some sort of AVR that he has that also supports IMAX Enhanced.
Okay. Gotcha.
Because
Gotcha.
that's the whole deal, is like, it's not just IMAX Enhanced, and it's not Dolby True HD, of course, and it's not
Right.
DTS Master Audio or DTS HD Master Audio either. It's not like the uncompressed version. It is still technically a new version of DTSX solely for the purpose of streaming
Mm-hmm.
over, miles and miles. So yeah, I still haven't gotten it to work, even though I have my Marantz SR7015 hooked up to my home theater currently in anticipation of being able to test it out. But I will not be able to test it out until I get a Sony TV, which they said they're going to send to me. So I'm a little disappointed that I haven't gotten it yet, since
Yeah.
Chris Boylan has already gotten it. And I think Chris Boylan lives on the East Coast or something, because I thought it was maybe like a logistics issue or
Mm-hmm.
distance. But because I know a few of the Acoustics writers do live in New York. So I can't remember if Chris Boylan is one of them or if he is another one that actually lives in Los Angeles,
Yeah.
with
I'm not
Brian
sure.
Mitchell, the owner of Acoustics.
Who?
Oh,
Just kidding.
so that would make sense if he does live in Los Angeles, that he got it so quickly, because whenever I get stuff sent from Sony, it comes from their San Diego office.
Mm-hmm.
That's obviously very close to Los Angeles, so I get it. But yeah, for this initial rollout, only TVs that are equipped with IMAX Enhanced / DTSX support will do Disney and DTSX or IMAX Enhanced. But support for streamers like Apple TV and Roku and Fire TV, whatever.
Shield, all that stuff.
Yeah, supposedly that's coming. Support for LG TVs, because it's Sony, Hisense, and TCL that are compatible right now, or some of their TVs are compatible
Yeah.
with this Disney launch. But yeah, LG TVs are supposedly getting support. The newer ones, like the 2024 LG TVs, like the G4 and the C4, will support it later this year, maybe around the holiday shopping season.
Yeah.
We'll see.
We shall see. We shall see. Before we go any further, I just want to mention that basically we're just going to kind of, I think, keep this kind of topical, or I mean, just a general here, because we're just going to be talking about this. But if you guys have any questions, put a GQ in front of it. That will, or just a Q, but a GQ would help us, or both, honestly, either one, however you want to do it. We're not too picky. It just helps us see it, and that way we can star it. We'll try to answer questions as we talk about stuff that we maybe find pertinent to what we're talking about at the moment. But typically, general questions we try to answer at the end of the stream. There are a couple that I want to just kind of address quickly now, just kind of get those done. But also, if you would like to throw a super chat or super sticker our way, that would be awesome. Not required. But we just appreciate it if you guys are even showing up. So thank you for being here again.
Yay.
These just help show your support to the channel directly without having to worry about like ad revenue and all that stuff. It just easy way for you to go, hey, I like what you're doing. Keep doing it. Here's $3 or whatever. You don't have to, but it's very awesome that when those come in. But I always say this every single week. Those will not we're not going to not answer your question because you didn't do a super chat. We're going to answer all the questions. So basically don't think, as many questions as we can.
Yeah.
Don't think that just because, I'm going to they want a super chat to answer a question. No, it's just a way, if you want to show your support, but we appreciate you guys being here. So real quick, couple of questions. I don't know what that word was. This one I think is aimed at me. Can you do a manual tutorial on manual calibration, PEQ? Thank you in advance. Yes. So I am really behind on my tutorials right now. So the first tutorial that's coming out is the mini DSP updated tutorial. That's the one that's the one I've promised forever. I mean, I promised a bunch, but there's that one. There's that's kind of the main one. There's a subwoofer PEQ tutorial that will just basically utilize the PEQs in subwoofers that have that built in. So like an SVS sub, and then manual calibration followed by multi QX. And then I'm hopeful that, there's a couple variations of the multi QX stuff I want to do. Because there's multiple ways you can use multi-QX. And then I've been dabbling in magic beans, which is Joe and Tell and Shauna's thing. So I'm hoping to do tutorials on that because I don't see a lot. And they take a very different approach to how they're doing it with, house curves and stuff. It's really interesting. I don't want to say too much because I haven't been able to critically listen. So I can't really say too much. I just can say that the process was relatively simple. But you do need some other, you need some equipment to make sure. You need equipment for all this stuff. So, yeah. Anyway, that was going to throw that out there. So yeah, we'll be doing all of those. I will say that Obsessive and Compulsive Audiophile has amazing tutorials over on his channel that can get a little deep, I think, for some people. So
he does get deep.
But if it sounds anyway, that's where my brain is at right now. But yeah, I'm gonna be doing all of those tutorials. I need to just sit down and do them. But sometimes I don't know what's going on with me lately. Life finds a way. And then secondly, before we move on, kind of talk about this stuff, the topic of the stream, Fan Reaction FC has a question. So far on back wall, I have some bi/dipole speakers. Shall I have them on the back wall above my head or to the side wall? Sadly, one side is right next to a wall, and buy or die. Thanks. And he goes on to say for surrounds 5.1.4.
I believe that's what he means. Yeah. 5.1.
Okay. So I was like, that's a lot of subs in one room. 5.14. So if we're talking about 5, so my preference, it might be different for Elon here. My preference is to have your surrounds at around ear height, especially with Atmos. You don't want them too high. You want to keep them with maybe within 2 feet of your ears. And that will basically allow better separation between your main speakers and your height speakers, which is what you want, because if they start blending too much together, then the effect is diminished and can actually cause phase cancellation and all this other stuff. I was about to say comb filtering, but I don't know if that's right. So what are we talking about? Video? But yeah, so that would be my recommendation, is to have them as close to ear height as possible. Going above is a little okay. But yeah, since you're you only have 5 and you don't have backs, you could move them back a little bit. You just want to be careful that if you have multiple seats, that if someone's sitting next to you, they're not blocking that that speaker overall or impacting the sound too much. So that's something to keep in mind. It's better to have them slightly forward if that's the case than kind of back behind you, because if someone's sitting next to you blocking the sound, they're going to reduce the sound by even on like in bipole mode or dipole mode, they're going to reduce the sound a lot, because even though you have speakers that are not technically like firing right at you, which is like the nature of bipole speakers that sorry, excuse me, that it's still going to affect the sound. So you want to be mindful of that. But that would be my recommendation. What about you?
I
Either?
would also throw in that it depends on your ceiling height. I would keep it as close as ear height as possible if you have 8-foot ceilings.
Hmm.
But if you have 9 or 10, then you can get away with having those speakers a little bit above ear height.
Right.
Is Yeah, if you have 8-foot ceilings, especially, I would try and keep that tweeter like right where your ear is. But as far as like dipole versus bipole, isn't it? I always kind of get these confused in my mind. I really need to like commit this to memory
Yeah, I'm just
better. But isn't bipole like the more direct, and dipole is more like scattered, like firing to the side? Um,
um
it's yeah, like bipole. Even though there's two speakers firing to the side, their it's output in a way where it still sounds like it's coming from one distinct location. Whereas
yeah,
dipole fires it in a way where it just kind of fires it to the sides, just
right.
to kind of try and mess with the surround immersion better.
Right. Yeah, I'm just reading on Audioholic's website because it was the first that
Mm,
popped up when I
yeah.
Googled bipole versus dipole. So bipole speakers, they are usually two arrays of drivers which face in opposite directions and are in phase with one another. The idea with bipole is to fire surround information into the seating area, but not directly at the listener to avoid hotspotting. Um,
Mm,
Dipoles are similar to bipole speakers, except one array, usually the rear array, is out of phase with the front array. So
that
dipoles require a bit more explanation. They go on to kind of describe them. But yeah, so basically, what that does is it creates a null or cancellation on axis, and
right.
like you get a level drop between like 8 and 12 dB. Um, but yeah, I would say I'd probably just go with like if you have bipole, if they're switchable, which I'm assuming that's what
Most
he's
are. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Most
Willie,
will have a
yeah.
little toggle switch. Dipole,
Yeah.
bipole.
I would say try bipole first. And then if you get fancy and you're like, I wonder what dipole sounds like, just flip it and try it. Like that's
Yeah.
the thing is like sometimes there's no as much as we like there to be, there's no clear cut answer in a specific room because the room is going to play a
Right.
major factor too. Like how far back from the wall are these surrounds going to be? That's going to affect stuff. Like
Mhm.
not just like from the seating, but like from the actual like back walls or from the front walls. And you know, do you have acoustic paneling? Do you have this? Do you have that? Like it just all
Mhm.
comes into play. So it's really hard to just kind of put a blanket like statement out there like bipole all the way all the time.
Yeah.
That sounds so it's like
I would
that's gotta be
like
on a shirt, like bipole all the way all the time.
but like you, I would I would try and test out bipole first. That's
Yeah.
usually my first instinct is
Hmm.
bipole first. But since it says sadly one side is right next to a wall,
Hmm.
maybe that side does better in the dipole position, and the side that's not so close to the wall on the other side is better in bipole. So you might even want to have both and switched differently to see if that
Yeah.
improves it. But typically I don't really like to do dipole necessarily, just because, especially with Atmos nowadays,
Hmm.
because then that's probably going to mess with any objects that are moving around in 3D space, because you're messing with phase. So that might also mess with where things are placed in three-dimensional space.
Right.
So that's why I would. again, probably go with dipole first, check it out, experiment, and then go dipole if you really want to see what it sounds like.
100%. Yeah, I would definitely go that route. And it better yet if you have REW, you have like a U mic or something. Also, do some measurements, see what each mode does. You know, you're using like real data, then like actual like visual data to kind of determine like your course of action. You might find that dipole may have some issues with frequency, or bipole may have some issues where bipole does not. Or by whatever I just said, you know what I mean. The opposite might actually somewhat correct those issues or negate those entirely, but it might also create different ones. So it's a give and take, unfortunately. But hopefully
Yeah.
that answers your question. So I think we're gonna move on here. So basically, the topic of this live stream podcast, if you're listening later, thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you. So basically, what makes or breaks an immersive mix? And I figured I'd kick this off to Elon first, mainly because maybe try to explain like what do we, when we say make or break, what are we implying?
Mhm. Well, here's the thing. I love Gravity because no matter where the camera is pointed and moving throughout the scene, especially the first, 20 minutes, the first 20 minutes are just chef's kiss as far as complete immersion with you in the center of the soundstage, literally. Because all the voices are traveling around the soundstage according to what the camera is looking at any given time. I love when mixes go to that extra level because it seems like nowadays, well, because for one, Gravity was the first. I know Brave was technically the first Dolby Atmos mix in a theater,
Mm-hmm.
but I believe Gravity was the first home audio mix that was also in Dolby Atmos on Blu-ray. Um, so Alfonso Cuarón was given uh, the budget to mess around with Atmos because it was brand new, and I really love how the studio allowed him to do that.
Yeah.
Just because Atmos, because it was such a big hit and it added this level of immersion that people now were demanding, because it is so in demand, it's become watered down because studios have to cut corners. Studios aren't given proper budgets to do an immersive mix.
Mm-hmm.
Studios aren't given, more importantly, the time to do an immersive mix like Gravity. Because what makes Gravity stand out is just how, like I was explaining, wherever the camera is looking, all the sounds around it are shifting with it. Because a lot of times you'll find dialogue, especially, you'll find a lot of Dolby Atmos mixes where the dialogue is 90% coming out of the center channel. Even if somebody just happens to be behind the screen or, talking from behind, whatever, you're not normally going to hear it behind you.
Right.
Um, and that's the level of immersion that I really like. Some people might be put off by that, though. I understand that. To have the audio kind of being here and over there and over here and over there, and up here and down there and over there. That's understandable, but to me, it really sells it more. If
Yeah.
just dialogue in particular, if a studio were to mix a Dolby Atmos mix and the sound effects and the music were pretty immersive, but they really, really dove in and dialed in the dialogue in particular to match wherever they are in 3D space according to the shot. I would be that would be awesome.
Yeah.
A more recent example of that, even though it was only mixed in 5.1, was The Killer with Michael Fassbender on Netflix, directed by David Fincher.
That's only a
That
5.1.
Yeah, that one's only in
What?
5.1,
What?
but it is a very immersive mix because shot for shot for shot, the audio changes according to what the shot is looking at. If it's from Michael Fassbender's perspective, if it's from like there's this scene where he's sitting near a fountain, just kind of hanging out, checking out his surroundings, surveying the area to really find out how he's going to accomplish, basically killing this person because that's his job. And I remember I remember hearing the fountain he was next to. It was over here in one shot, and then it was over here in another shot, and it was behind in another shot because it was according to what
Yeah.
the camera
Yeah.
was looking at. And I love that kind of stuff. So I want more of that. But I don't know. I can see why some studios may not go to that degree because maybe it doesn't matrix down that well. Like if you're just watching it on a phone or a computer or just a 2-channel system,
Hmm.
it might sound off or it might sound weird. It might not matrix down properly since it was originally mixed in 5.1. So that might be one of the issues that all audio mixes aren't to that degree of immersion.
Right.
So, but to me, that's really what I want out of an immersive mix is
Yeah.
to literally be in the middle and have everything shift around according to what the camera's looking at. So that's my take.
That's your take. Well, you're allowed to have your opinion, and I disagree. No, I do want to point out something you're wrong on, and Lighthouse pointed it out. And I didn't know this either. So Transformers: Age of Extinction was the first home media Blu-ray with Dolby Atmos. Yeah, and unfortunately,
What?
that movie was just. I mean, we saw that. My wife and I saw that in the theater, and it
Yeah.
was. Was it? Isn't that the first one with Mark Wahlberg? I think
I
so.
think so.
And it was
Honestly, I
just.
don't think I've seen that one.
It's almost 3 hours of just garbage, like, and him just going, Optimus, I don't know what we're gonna do. Come on, like he's just the whole, yeah. Anyway, visually it's striking, but
Yeah.
the actual like and auditorily it's great, but uh, yeah, completely underutilized Anthony Hopkins as well. Like, what did you just need a paycheck? Like, what's going on here?
Oh, maybe I have seen
Um,
that one. Maybe that's the one I own.
yeah, I mean, Michael Bay is no stranger to uh like quick cutting and all. Like Ambulance was another one that I honestly couldn't make it
Mm.
more than 30 minutes into that movie without shutting it off. It was like the dialogue was written by like a 5-year-old and all. Anyway,
Right.
um regardless of the audio or video presentation, I also found the FPV drone shots to be nauseating. Like they just.
Mm.
Anyway, yeah. Also, Willie brings up something. Where was it? There we go. Says, I'm not saying Atmos is overhyped. I like it, but does it really do that much more than what could be achieved with a good 7.1 mix? Well, I mean, in the case of like Gravity, I don't think you could do the same thing.
True.
Only because Gravity, but I also feel like Gravity is kind of like an outlier in all of the Atmos
Yes.
mixes in terms of immersion. It's almost like the movie. The thing I will say about the Atmos track, I texted Elon earlier today because I'd like watched some scenes from it, and I ended up watching the first like half an hour of it, and I didn't even realize I'd watched half an hour of it. Like I was just so kind of I hadn't seen any clips of it since I upgraded my theater to
Mm.
7.4.4. So I hadn't.
Ooh.
I'm there was just it was so like detailed, the presentation.
Mhm.
It was so I mean, I keep saying immersive, but it was also seamless, and I think that's another thing that it does
Yes.
really well. So when you have all these things panning across the room or overhead or from this direction to that direction, never once was I taken out going, that's panning like harshly from one to the other. And I don't even like my height speakers, the Atmos speakers are not timbre matched to my bed layer. They're not the same speakers.
Mhm.
So it was a kind of I've got everything dialed in, but it was also just a testament to how the sound design is on the movie. And I think that that is also where a movie can fail in terms of Atmos, is if the sound design itself isn't really up to the task. Now, obviously, if it's a comedy or something that's not really the intent there isn't to create this crazy immersive audio mix, it's
Mhm.
very dialogue heavy, so it's going to be anchored on the front soundstage, then okay, that's cool. But I think there's like a not every movie needs this like level of immersion that we have with
Sure.
Gravity. Just like not every movie needs to be completely grain free or something. Like I see that all the time. Like, not to turn this into a video debate, but my wife and I, when it first came out, tried to watch the Beatles documentary Get Back
Mm.
on Disney Plus. It
Yep.
is probably one of the most to me it's completely unwatchable. We didn't watch it because the video quality is so awful. Whatever upscaling, AI, denoising, and all that stuff they did,
Mm.
like the whole thing was like it was from 60 millimeter footage. So
Yeah.
they pretty much cropped it in, denoised the heck out of it. Like everybody's hair just looked like blobs. Like it doesn't look good at all. Like
Right.
I was completely taken aback by how bad it looks. And unfortunately, if we look at some of the stuff that he did with the Lord of the Rings movies to try to make them look more like the Hobbit movies, we can see similar things with like certain shots with noise reduction. But anyway,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's like I don't think that like the intent of every movie or every Atmos thing or Atmos track should be let's just throw all the shit that we can in the height channels because like that's gonna be
Right.
my whole thing is, do I notice the height channels a lot during the movie? And I gotta say, as much as active as Gravity is, never once was I like taken out of the movie because I kept hearing the stuff in the height channels.
It was just a part
It
of it.
added to the experience. Yeah. Whereas like
Yeah.
talked about the Atmos track on Twister, where it's like almost too much.
Yeah.
Like when they're sitting in a diner and you can hear stuff above you, like silverware clanking. I'm like, this is a one-story building. Why am I hearing silverware up here? It doesn't make sense in that regard. So I think when it's used properly, oh my gosh, like it can be a much better like experience overall in terms of the overall soundstage. Um, with that said, I will say I have noticed a pretty massive upgrade just adding 2 surround speakers behind me, like going to
Yeah.
7.1 instead of the 5. Like that
Right.
actually still surprises me. I was even in Gravity, like there's a lot of stuff going on back there.
Mhm.
Um that I had to replay certain parts of it because I didn't notice. Like I was so like entranced in like the movie. And that scene where like it like the camera like goes into her helmet and so now you're like
Right.
hearing her breathing and yeah, everything about the track is I think I said this morning, I was like, it's still 100% reference
Mhm.
in terms of an Atmos mix and how like well everything is put together, sound design, sound mixing and everything. Um, but yeah, I think that it can add a lot, but like Elon was saying, uh, studios, movies are not given the time or maybe budget or just maybe the director doesn't want that. Maybe if you're like
Yeah.
a Christopher Nolan type, he's a stereo guy. He doesn't really like surround sound.
Mhm.
So he's all of his mixers are very front heavy, if you've never noticed that. Um, and I think there's surround sound stuff in there because the sound engineers are like, well, people are gonna like complain if this isn't like this or whatever.
Right.
I don't know if that's the case, but like, I'm thinking of Interstellar when they're in the cornfield and I can hear the corn passing by me on the
Mm.
side. I'm sure Christopher Nolan would have been like, I don't like that. I don't know why, but he's what did I say today? He's a cinematic genius with a hearing problem. That's
Right.
I think that's probably a good it's just, he just likes his shit loud, man. Just like turn it
Yeah.
up. I can't hear.
Yeah,
Um
no doubt.
but
And I
yeah, so
mean,
I
just to kind of piggyback off of that, I mean, Gravity was literally made for Atmos.
yes.
Just because you're dealing with space, you're dealing with um, George Clooney literally traveling up and over and around and to the
Yep.
side and back. Not every movie obviously is going to have that. So I get it how not every movie needs an immersive soundtrack like that.
Yeah.
But the fact that you are in space and you have all these things, not only people moving around you, but objects moving around you. And, when the debris starts to fly past them and stuff, like, the camera's looking over here at
Yeah.
the debris that just flew by, and then it pans back over, and you can still hear George Clooney's voice in the back behind you, and then it pans over, and George Clooney's in the frame now, and now you can hear him in front of you. And
Yeah.
that seamless
Yeah.
transition when just a pan, just a simple pan, that transition of him, it's just, yeah, that movie was literally made for Atmos.
Yeah. And Willie does bring up a good point. So thank you for being active in the comments, Willie. Appreciate it. He says he's not really convinced about Atmos, which is the notion that object-based audio is somehow transformative. To me, it's just a bit better than channel-based audio. And I'll agree to a point. I think the biggest benefit is with object-based audio is the scalability. That's kind of
Yes.
where like uh that comes into play, where like you have like maybe like I started with a like a 5 channel system with 2 subs, right? So a Dolby Atmos track will scale to that, right? A uh if we go up to like I then upgraded to like a 5.1.2, so I had 2 top middle, still had the 2 subs, but now I had the additional speakers. Atmos scale to that. I then
Mhm.
upgraded when we moved here to 4, when I upgraded my receiver to 4 height channels, and I was able to use. I mean, all these mixes are adapting to that the speaker layout, and then I
Right.
added 2 more backs, and so now I have like kind of the full bubble. Um, it just scaled to everything. Now there is a limit on the home system, and unfortunately, what we're finding out now is a lot of companies, Disney, are hard coding these mixes. So they're no longer object based. So like if you're on, let's say Disney Plus, we'll stay streaming. I even think I think Disney for the most part is not really putting out much on physical media anymore anyway. Could be wrong about that. But a lot of their mixes have been static 7.4 or 7.1.4. So like
Yep.
if you have 6 overhead channels, guess what? Those top middles typically are going to be silent. You're not going to hear anything.
Mhm.
And the problem with that is you can't even use up mixing then to fill in that hole because it's a static mix. It's taking the scalability out of it now. And I think I'm beginning to think that Disney is first and foremost mixing for Disney Plus.
Yep.
And then and they may be hard coding it there to save on bandwidth, and then they're just giving the lossless version, or they're taking that, because obviously they have the main like uncompressed file or whatever. They're taking that and then compressing it losslessly for like 4K Blu-ray. And so unfortunately it's inheriting that same limitation.
Mhm.
um and that's why also like you don't find a lot of, especially with like Disney stuff, like somebody mentioned that like they were getting nothing out of their front wides in certain Atmos movies, and like some Atmos movies don't even like they don't even make use of front wides.
Oh, actually, let me pull up another one of Willie's
Yeah,
comments.
go for it.
couple weeks ago, I fitted
Yep, yep,
front
yep.
wides. Not convinced they've pumped out much in a handful of Atmos films I watched so far. Perhaps I should have heeded Elon's video on this a bit more. No, but that's totally true. It's disappointing that a lot of Atmos, quote unquote, mixes are mixed with 7.1.4 in mind, and they don't scale past that.
Right.
It's only a handful or maybe 10 discs out there where the Atmos track actually does, um, scale even to front wides because they mixed it that way. Because it really all just depends on how it was mixed in the post production facility. Godzilla versus Kong comes to mind. The remaster of The Matrix comes to mind. Those were, yeah, those were done very well because I could hear stuff going on in the front wides when I don't have front wides currently in my theater, but when I did have them connected, yeah, it was really cool to actually hear when the Atmos mix took advantage of those extra speakers.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, it really is about scalability.
Yeah. And I think kind of pointing to Van Gool's comment, which kick-ass name, by the way. I love it. Um, Basically, like the scalability, hearing the difference in a lot of these movies, like Mad Max Fury Road is the one that always comes to mind. That's an incredibly active mix on all speakers, right? I haven't seen Furiosa yet. I do want to see it. I might actually like go to the theater if I can, because I guess it's nobody's going to the theater to see it, unfortunately.
I
Um,
know, so disappointing.
which yeah. Anyway, that was like a movie that I was like, okay, it sounds good with five speakers and two subs. And then I added like the top middles, and I was like, oh man, there's some cool shit going on up here, right? And then I added the four, and I'm like, whoa, like there's a lot more going on up here.
Yeah.
Especially the panning back and forth and all of this the stuff. And then the
Mhm,
back surrounds
mhm.
really added this whole other level of like things suddenly, like it was okay before, but like just adding those two physical speakers back there, man, like there's so much that like is going through the room past your
Yeah.
ears. I'm just like, okay, like this, I've always said, okay, yeah, okay, it's a cool mix, but hearing it in the full system, especially with four subs, also
Right.
helps dialed in. Like it's not too hot, it's not too like overbearing, because that the bass in that movie is insane. It can be insane. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a great movie to showcase, but yeah, it does make you wonder. It's like that movie again is kind of an outlier. If we're looking at kind of more modern movies where not a lot is going on up top,
Mhm.
kind of like up here. That's not what I mean, but not a lot's going on in the height channels. You know, so yeah. I mean, again, if it's a comedy, okay. But if it's like a
Yeah.
high octane action movie and you're watching, you're like, what the hell's going on? Like, I don't like, is something wrong? Like, you're checking your receiver thinking that something's off. Like, do I have dynamic compression on or something that I don't
Mhm.
know? Oh, Techno Dad's in the house. Techno Dad. Yo, we are causing trouble again, always.
Yeah. Actually, I wanna highlight this from him. Speaking of front wides, I have a specific track I mix in 9.1.6. I put sounds in the front wides. Let me know if you want the file. Yeah, that's what Technodad's been doing lately. He's been mixing his own, I mean, it's, licensed music, but he's been doing his own Atmos mixes of that music,
Hmm.
taking the stems and just literally putting them all around the
Wow.
soundstage. So hit him up if you wanna,
Yeah.
'cause I believe they're free downloads. So you can just download it and, they're in a specific format like MKV or MT2S or something. So if
Yeah.
your Blu-ray player supports that, you can download it and pop it right in, man.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I had a thought, and then it went away. It was gone. It was gone. Um, but yeah, like
Yeah.
so for movies and stuff, it's we're kind of limited with like basically what the mixers want to do, what the director wants, what the studio may have a say, in what gets done. There's a lot of moving parts to a movie. What I will say is that I've been playing a lot of games on PC lately, and the Dolby Atmos support on more modern games is really great. Alan Wake 2, great use of Dolby Atmos. Helldivers 2, holy crap! Like the Atmos in that game is. I was just playing it last night with my brother and sister-in-law, and yeah, I'd forgotten about some of it, and I hadn't played it since I added the back surrounds either.
Oh
And this
yeah.
makes like basically you're on the ground. Think of it's like Starship Troopers mixed with like I don't want to say Destiny, but like it's like a cooperative like campaign type thing. You're going to these planets, and you drop in with ships and everything, and you have all of these artillery things that you can call in. They're called stratagems, but they fire from your ship up in space.
Mhm.
You could think that they would just kind of cheap out and just okay, yeah, they're just that you hear a firing sound and bam. No, they put it wherever the ship is in relation to you. They put it in the height channels. So like
Mhm.
if the ship is behind you to the right, you're gonna hear it fire from there.
Right.
Conversely, if it's up front on the left, you're gonna hear it fire from up there. And then if it's firing behind you, you can hear the arc go the whole. It's so freaking cool. And I'm like, holy crap! I'd forgotten about this game's audio, and it floored me, especially coming off of Hellblade 2, which I mentioned earlier.
Mhm.
That game is very. I mean, they recommend very right in the beginning to use headphones because it was mixed
Oh.
for binaural audio.
Oh.
Yeah, the first game was similar, but I think they eventually updated it because I remember playing the first game and having basically this character with psychosis is
Mhm.
the character you play as. She has voices that are constantly like talking to her in her head. Like it's kind of like the angel on this side and the devil on this side. It's kind of
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
And there's some other like narration that happens, but it was kind of coming from all around you along with the sound effects. This game for whatever reason, right now at least, all of the dialogue, all the voices are hard coded to the front soundstage. So it's
Oh,
mainly coming from the front, left, and right, and occasionally the center. Now the
geez.
sound effects and stuff are coming through Atmos, like the height channels or the back surrounds or whatever,
Mhm.
but none of the voices do. So it really takes me out of the experience. I finished the game, but it was like I was like, this could have been a tour de force of like Atmos, right?
Yeah.
Because you technically have all the makings to get a similar binaural experience, but physically in your room
Mhm.
with speakers instead of using headphones. And I don't know, maybe they didn't even bother to do it. I don't know. I'm hoping that it will get updated eventually. Um,
I
yeah,
know,
it
maybe it kinda sounds like they were rushed just to release it for some reason.
well, they've been working on it for 5 years. Um,
Oh.
visually, it's probably. I mean, I could see where it- it's hard to call it a game, honestly. It's more of like you walk a lot in this game. It's more story driven.
Ah.
So yeah, it's probably the longest I've held up on my left analog stick in a game. It took me about 6 hours to beat, and at least 50 to 60% of that was holding up on the.
Right.
Yeah, there's very little combat. And yeah. And the thing is like you're walking at a snail's pace. But yeah, like visually, it was probably one of the best looking games on PC at least. I didn't play it on the console.
Mm.
Um, and but on the audio side, I was really disappointed. It's also relatively short compared to the first game. So
Oh, yeah.
this was supposed to be like Microsoft's big kind of I don't know, like they were kind of hyping this thing up, and yeah,
Yeah.
I was just kind of it pales in comparison to the first game, unfortunately. But yeah, the audio mix on that was pretty bad. But then going over to Star Wars Jedi Survivor, which has a native Dolby Atmos mix, that's like a completely different ball game. It's like
Mm.
amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. Like just sound design in general. The bass in that game too. It's just, yeah, it's a joy to play, especially coming off of Hellblade.
Yeah.
Joe and Tell is here. Joe, what's up, man?
Yeah. Hey, Joe. We got Joe and Tell and Techno Dad joining us
Both of them.
today.
Both of them are here.
We feel so special. Hey, Joe. Yeah. Man. Yeah, I mean that's the whole thing about video games is that's what's incredible to me about video games actually nowadays who that have native Atmos mixes
Yeah.
is that, they have to be on that completely next level when it comes to audio because it has to follow wherever your character is looking.
Yeah.
Unlike a movie where it's just static and it's, you're just looking at a screen the whole time,
Yeah.
not really moving anywhere. So, because yeah, it just having to constantly be shifting around like that, depending on how you are moving your character, it still
Yeah.
just boggles my mind. It's amazing how that works.
Yeah. And all like there's actually technology built into more modern game engines that make it easier. Avatar Frontiers of Pandora is one of them, where
Mm.
the way they kind of have everything set up, um, not to get too deep into game technology, but ray tracing has kind of been all the rage for the past couple of years on the visual side, but it actually aids the audio side too, because if basically it's a way of telling the game you have a certain type of material, say this is a metal reflective surface. Well, guess what? You can also have the audio affected by that metal surface too. So instead of
Yeah.
like it just seeing like a blank, like, polygon thing, it's like, oh, okay, if I fire my gun next to this thing, I'm going to get extra like reverberation from it, but I'm also going to get kind of like maybe a tinny sound.
Yeah.
So like all of these little things that can be done on the visual side can actually aid in like all of it, like how like determining how far away something is, So
Hmm.
I think it's kind of an under like an often overlooked aspect of games because we're a visual. We don't notice something's wrong with the audio unless it's wrong with the audio, right? Like
Right.
if it sounds bad, we notice it, but if it doesn't sound bad, we just kind of almost take it for granted. Like we don't understand
Mhm.
what all goes into it. Um, unless you're kind of like me and you, where we're constantly dissecting things as we're consuming that content, right? Like I
Yeah.
don't watch a movie like my wife watches a movie. Nothing. I'm
Right.
not saying anything negative there, and she'll even say she's like, you can't turn your brain off, and I can't. I see a bad
No,
green
it's true.
screen,
Yeah.
it sticks out to me. I see poorly recorded ADR. I'm like, oh, what the heck? Like obviously their lips weren't even moving. They weren't saying those words.
Right.
But it's that thing where with games, audio has come so far in games over the past, like let's say 5 years, like more so than like just Dolby Atmos in like movies. That it's like most of these games today, outside of like indie games, like I think Planet of Lana was one where it was just pretty much stereo. Like
Yeah.
sometimes, I mean, what was the budget on that game? It made by like 5 people, things like that come
Mhm.
into play. But even smaller games can now use this technology that's built into a lot of these game engines.
Yeah.
It's super cool.
I know because since our subject today is about what makes or breaks an immersive mix, I mean, honestly, um, if you really want to take advantage, if you have a kick-ass Dolby Atmos or just immersive audio system, whether that be 5.1.2 or even 9.4.6, whatever. If you really want to take advantage of an immersive audio mix, I honestly highly recommend getting an Xbox Series X or a PS5 and investing in that form of entertainment because that is where the next level immersion is happening right now, currently. Unfortunately, not every movie is like Gravity. So
Right.
if you're disappointed in the very like the 5 movies out there that have a really, really immersive Atmos mix, and you're not getting your money's worth that you put into having a Dolby Atmos system, get yourself a gaming console, man. Or like in your case, get yourself a really nice PC, a
Yeah.
gaming PC, and yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
even if you're not a gamer, maybe you should be
Yeah.
if you feel like
Yeah.
you're not getting your money's worth.
Yeah. I mean, and gaming can be hard to get into for a lot of people for various reasons, and that's
Sure.
okay. You know, PCs are inherently going to cost more if you're not if you want something that will exceed the console, they're inherently going to cost more.
Yeah.
Uh, you can get something similar right now for about the same, well, maybe a little more than a console.
Mhm.
But again, it's also a computer. You can use it for other things if you want to. Uh, but I did want to I do want to bring this up because I remember building my first PC and getting a Sound Blaster. I think it was Audigy X or Audigy 2X or something like that. So it was a card that you inserted that got you. This is before like HDMI and everything. I think probably even before component, right? Like it
Oh,
was,
wow.
yeah, we were using like I was still like my video card still just had like VGA output on it. Like it wasn't, I mean, gosh. But yeah, getting that and it was like a beast of a card, and I had to make sure I could fit it like on my motherboard and everything. It was now these days it's like, okay, I don't even bother with a sound card because like I'm just going HDMI out from my video card to my display. And that's feeding the audio via eARC to the receiver. So it's like all I can do uncompressed, I can do Dolby Atmos, I can do DTS if I want to. Actually, my display doesn't support that, so I can't do it. But now it's like we've kind of removed the need for, you know, when we're talking about like multi-channel stuff for like basically the biggest point of the sound cards back in the day was like the DACs were built into those and you could, go out like from that. They had like high quality conversion and all this stuff. But now it's like we're just letting our receivers do everything. Like
Mhm.
we're letting the DACs and the receiver or pre-pro, whatever we're using, do it all without the need for all that. I mean, there's still maybe a need. They still do make sound cards for very specific use cases, but outside of that, it's like we don't really it's not really a necessity anymore,
Mhm.
So things have gotten a lot more simplistic in terms of what you actually need. You don't even like I built 2 computers for my in-laws, and neither of them have drives connected to them via cable, right? They're all just on the NVMe ports on or the NVMe slots on the motherboard. Like there's no they could add more. There's a capability to do it, but they didn't, and it just makes that so simple.
Yeah.
It just it's great. Um, like going down like a PC tangent rabbit hole, but yeah, no, I mean people have mentioned like it, where was it? I saw it. Willie said this. It says sometimes seems to me that games do a better job of placing objects in real time than some movies do. And yeah, they do because they have that data in real time from the game engine telling it
Yes.
here's where the character is in relation to this object. And so they could, if you're panning the camera around, I do this all the time in games. I just slowly pan the camera around. If there's like a waterfall behind me, I'll listen to it transition around me, right? Like from
Right.
speaker to speaker. And it's like if I close my eyes, your speakers are positioned properly and calibrated and all that stuff. I could tell you where the waterfall is,
Mhm.
without even seeing it. And
Yeah.
same, if I turn the camera down, I could hear it start to go over me. It's really, really great. But you don't kind of get that in a movie because like I think they're maybe mixing for a different purpose, right? Like it's also just once the mix is done, unless you're going to do a remix, it's done. Like you're not touching it again. Whereas like a
Mhm.
game track is dynamic all the time, pretty much outside of cutscenes and things like that, where they could, do a more traditional audio mix.
Right. Yeah, it has to follow the action. So
It does, yeah.
yeah.
And some games do it very well, and some games don't do it very well.
Right.
For a long time, people may not know this, games did not use the center channel at all. If we go back even 5 or 6 years, a lot of the Call of Duties didn't use the center channel. A lot of first person shooters didn't use the center channel. They would just pump the audio through, like basically create a phantom center from the front, left, and right.
Mm-hmm.
Problem is, if you're sitting off center or off axis, you didn't sound right. Like that was not anchored to the screen anymore. It sounded more like it was coming from the right or from the left. So yeah, but now things have gotten a lot better, and most games use the center channel.
For real.
So for me, I guess what makes or breaks an immersive mix is does it serve the story? I think that is really what it comes down to for me. Like I said earlier, with Gravity, yeah, it's 100% serves the story, just as the visual effects serve the story.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's really calling attention to itself in terms of like visually or even auditorily. Like, it's just an experience. I think something like, we'll go back to the Hobbit movies. The Atmos mixes on those movies are poor. Like, they were in the theater, they are at home. That's regardless of the bass being anemic in those movies. It just doesn't. There's no immersion there for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Like, for you, I mean, what would you say makes or breaks like an immersive mix? Like, if you hear it too much, does that break it for you? If you're like constantly aware that there's stuff coming out of the height channels, does that affect you at all?
I mean, like you were saying, the turbine edition of Twister. Yeah, like if I'm hearing things that are coming out of the high channels that shouldn't be coming out of the high channels. Like when I didn't first realize that the silent space mix of Gravity is only mixed in 5.1. And when I was hearing garbled dialogue coming out of the heights that in the original mix would not be coming out of the heights at all. That kind of that bugs me for sure. But that's just my AVR trying to up mix the 5.1 mix. So it's, just kind of doing its best guesswork to figure out what needs to go into the heights and what stays down on the ear level. So yeah, that kind of stuff does kind of that breaks it for me. But that's also probably, my Marantz SR7015's ability to upmix. It may have been. I'm still going to do this test, but I have yet to try this out. But I want to watch the Silent Space version with the RO3D upmixer and see if that does any better. Because apparently the RO3D upmixer is like one of the best around.
Yeah.
Because it's been around even before Dolby Atmos and DTS:X were a thing. So yeah, that it's not so much if things are in the height channels that shouldn't be. What bugs me is when something is above me and I don't hear anything in the high channels.
Yeah.
That breaks it for me, where it's like, you had this opportunity and you just wasted it. I remember Techno Dad, when he was watching the part 1 of Rebel Moon on Netflix, that he did the same thing that I did for Gravity, where he turned off all his ear level speakers and just had the height channels going.
Yeah.
And there were several scenes where it's some action scene or even a not so action scene where there's rain falling. You could easily have rain coming out of the height channels only. And it was silent, just absolutely nothing coming out of the height channel. It's like, is that what Atmos was originally like thought up for?
Yeah.
Was atmospheric things like wind and rain and all kinds of stuff happening above you? Like if you're not putting rain in the height channels, that's like Atmos 101. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. For real.
Were you really pressed for time, or were you only given $10 to do the Atmos mix
Yeah.
and you only had an hour to do it? Oh, yeah, that kind of stuff really bugs me. Um, when there should be some height information and there is nothing. So,
Yeah. That, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at too. I just like the expectation, of kind of putting you there in the action. It's like, why even have it in Atmos then if it's not going to be like if especially if it doesn't kind of match with the rest of the film, right? Like if it's like you have these scenes where it's like, oh man, it's like over the top, done, like overdone, and then uh what is happening here? Like there's barely anything going on. Um,
I just need to plug in my laptop real quick.
oh sure. Here, let's look at something here. I gotta highlight this comment because someone mentioned Taylor Swift, the Eras tour. I, okay, I'll say this much: I wouldn't know what it sounds like because I'm not a fan. Um, Nothing against her or Lady Gaga or what. I don't listen to that type of music ever. It's just not my cup of tea. Um,
I thought she was your favorite.
yeah, I'm not a Swiftie at all. I do like a good concert movie for an artist that I do like.
Yeah.
The thing is, I've never heard a Taylor Swift song that I'm like, oh yeah, I want to listen to that on the sound in the theater room.
Mhm.
Um, Now if you give me some like I don't know, give me some Metallica, give me some even like John Williams, Hans Zimmer, like that kind of stuff. Those two Blu-rays are fantastic. Um, even stuff that like the Police, some
Mhm.
old school like stuff, older concerts remixed in Atmos. I'll definitely, yeah. There's I think it was the Police. I can't remember, or like the Rolling Stones, like things like that. But yeah, I mean, it's cool that they're making it that immersive,
Mhm.
for people that are fans, of which I've said before, I am not. Um, I'm also one of those people that unless it's a movie, I can sit through some of a movie if I'm like, oh, the audio is probably going to be great on this. Like Twisters, the it's not out yet, but just from the trailer, I'm just like, this is gonna why? It's probably gonna sound good, and so
Sure.
I might try to sit through it for that when it comes to home video.
Mhm.
But otherwise, like it's easier for me to sit through a movie or turn off a movie than listen to an artist who I just have no desire to listen to their music. If that makes sense. Um,
Yeah.
Nothing against people that do. Oh yes, Willie mentioned Metallica Through the Never, superb on 3D Blu-ray. I saw that at IMAX 3D, um,
Oh.
and it was almost like for a long time I had been chasing the sound of that movie or that experience, I should say, at the IMAX 3D because I needed. I honestly probably should have worn earplugs.
Yeah.
My ears were ringing for 2 days after I saw it. It was like it was the told a couple of friends of mine after that. I was like, it's probably the closest you could be like, instead of going to a concert, it's the closest you can get without actually going to a concert. Yeah, I also thought it was a pretty cool like experience, like a kind of a different thing where they kind of melded a movie and a concert together. Did it work? I don't know. Um, it's got Harry Osborn. I mean, Dane DeHaan from the Amazing Spider-Man movies in it, who's also actually in a very, very good movie by Gore Verbinski called A Cure for Wellness, which also has, I think it's just in 5-1. I could be wrong, but it's kind of like a psychological thriller. Definitely worth checking out if you like bass. It's also a great movie. I kind of, I don't want to compare it to Shutter Island, but it has that psychological element to it. So yeah, definitely worth watching. Um, yeah, Beetlejuice. I can't say his name more than 3 times or more than twice or else. Beetlegeist. Yeah, I want to see that. We might go see it in the theater. I have some reservations about it, but I'm trying to, after seeing the trailer, I'm trying to withhold my yeah. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I want to keep my expectations low because it seems like recently with any nostalgic sequel that has come out, they've been just kind of hitting the mark. So
Yeah. Yeah. I also think that it's great that they got like the original cast back, right? Like
yes,
Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice. The makeup looked a little off to me in the trailer, but that could have just been the trailer.
right.
What I will say is Tim Burton is a different director now than he was when Beetlejuice came out originally. And I've enjoyed his movies up to a point. There are some movies where I've just kind of completely checked out and I'm like, no, um, I don't want any part of this Alice in Wonderland stuff. Like, I don't, just didn't do anything for
Yeah,
me, didn't he do Dumbo or something like that too? Like,
he did. Yeah,
just not really. I enjoyed Sleepy Hollow, even Sweeney Todd, even though I'm not a musicals guy.
right.
Um,
That was pretty good.
but
Yeah.
but yeah, he's got some definite hit or misses with me. I actually really enjoyed Big Fish. I really enjoyed the
Oh yeah,
story on that one. That one
yeah,
was a great movie. Carl the
yeah,
Giant.
yeah. Big Fish is
Um,
good. Kind
let's see.
of going back to up mixing. Joe
Yeah,
and Tell did say that you'll get less artifacts with the Aromatic up mixer compared to the Dolby Surround up mixer or DTS Neural X because of
makes
the
sense.
way it up mixes. So
Yeah, makes sense.
that makes me excited to test it out, to test out the silent space mix in Aromatic up mixer.
Automatic.
Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba.
Well, let's see here. Oh, yes, Van Gogh. Mars Attacks needs a 4K Atmos release. The alien sounds in Dolby Atmos would be amazing.
Right.
It's so good. It's yeah. I haven't seen that movie in a while. I need to watch it. I need to watch it. There was something else I wanted to see. I think we're talking about Ghostbusters. Yeah, I was kind of bummed about the Frozen Empire Ghostbusters. I thought Afterlife was much better. But I'm an old school man. Give me the original 2
Mm.
Ghostbusters over those, even though the other one was good. This is actually a good question. And then I'll get to Joe and Tell's answer question here. Do you guys tend to watch 5.1 movies upmix into all of your speakers?
Typically, yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
it may just be laziness on my part because I have it set up to where my receiver just automatically does it.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but yeah, there are occasions where I may, like when I watched The Killer,
hmm
knowing it was David Fincher, who is very meticulous. and very OCD about his audio mixes. Yeah, that particular one I did in its native 5.1 mix because I did not want to hear anything other than the original mix.
Yeah.
So there are moments like that, but typically I say about 90% of the time I just
Yeah.
let the up mixer do its thing.
Would you do the same then with like Christopher Nolan's movies, since he's always predominantly like 5.1? I don't even think there's like a 7.1 mix of any of his
I
movies out
know.
there.
I don't think there is. Yeah. It's crazy. I
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'll just have them up mixed anyway, just as a big
Yeah.
middle finger to Christopher
To
Nolan.
yeah, stop making poor audio choices. Um let's just compress the hell out of the dynamic range and just make everything loud. Uh
Yeah.
I tend to, yeah, I mean, for movies and TV shows, I'm pretty much up mixing. Like my wife and I've been watching SG1. We're on season 7 now.
Mhm.
Um, Pretty much doing up mixing all throughout that. And there have actually been some pretty cool moments. I typically use the DTS Neural X up mixer. I don't have like an Oro 3D license or anything. I'm not at a point where I really want to pay. Was it like 200 or $400, something like that? Some, I think it's $200, maybe more.
Mhm.
I don't know. I could probably get a license from Oro, but I don't know. I think wouldn't mind checking that out. But yeah, I typically use
Yeah.
DTX Neural X, and it sounds great. There's been moments in the show. I mean, this is a show from, God, we're like, I think we're 2003, like is when we're
Yeah.
at the season we're watching. So we're,
20 years ago.
yeah, yeah. So um it's a TV show from 20 years ago, so you gotta keep that in mind. But overall, like the sound design, especially in some of the later seasons, you can tell they got more budget and technology advances more. However, like there is some scenes in like the previous seasons where they're like underground in these caves and there's like stuff going on and you could hear stuff above you, like
Yeah.
coming out of like this is a stair, like this is a 5.1 mix. So it's taking whatever it can from there. And I was surprised at how like functional it was. I didn't expect it to really place these objects above, but
Yeah.
it did a great job of making it sound like the gunfire was coming from on the surface and not, slightly elevated,
Right.
which is, I've always said like I'll use like the Dolby surround up mixer if I just want more of an ambience, because it
Yeah.
doesn't really do a good job of placing objects or placing faux objects, I guess you could call it,
Mhm.
in those height channels. And so like for music and stuff, I might not want that. I might just go with a Dolby surround up mixer, but most of the time I'm using a um, DTS Neural X up
Yeah.
mixer.
Yeah.
And then to go back here, Joe asked how the Magic Beans calibration is coming, Brad. Well, I don't know. I I ended up going out of town, having a really bad like experience, and then was sick when I came back. And then my mom was in the hospital. So again, yeah, I'm still using it. It sounds great, but I haven't taken a mic to it yet. That's kind of the plan. Like I just he gave me the license. For those that don't know, Joe was very gracious and gave me access to it. Um and that I talked about a little earlier, but yeah, the overall process was different than I was accustomed to, but it was super cool how it like all works. Um but yeah, I'll like shoot you a message, Joe, and kind of let you know where I'm at with it too, because I definitely like think that more people need to know about this, because what I've heard, I have, again, haven't put measurements to it. Um, Initially, I transferred the wrong file to MultiQX. I transferred the, what is it, the per channel file, and then I was like, oh wait, that's the wrong one because it sounded weird.
Yeah.
And basically, it was the near field response corrected,
Ah,
but not taking into account the room, the like where
right.
the. So I was like, yeah, this oh wait, and then I realized I selected the wrong one. So I went back and re-exported, and now it sounds awesome. Like it sounds, I don't think I've like the amount of work I had to do to get it sounding the way it does now would have probably taken me, I don't know. I mean, we're talking about now, like knowing what I know, maybe 6 to 8 hours to get everything dialed in
Mm,
with the speaker configuration I have.
yeah.
Whereas literally took me an hour. Obviously, I
Right.
haven't done any like post EQ measurements to kind of see how it compares to what I did.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, Joe actually brings up a really really great point too. It's interesting to see your target curve because um, yeah, that kind of he and I had talked about it prior, and he's like, I'm almost willing to bet that the target curve that Magic Beans gives you, the true target, is going to be close to what you're listening to now. And it
Yeah.
and it is. It's like obviously there's like some differences, which I knew, but I was like surprised at how close it was. I mean, we're talking about within a dB or two on like
Whoa.
basically on each thing. And
Mhm.
honestly, sometimes you probably may not like I'm just like, wow, okay, it takes me how long to do this, and then this app just does it for me
Right.
and allows me to kind of mess around with different settings and stuff too. And if I want to do something a certain way. So it's very full featured. I said earlier, Joe, that because someone asked about tutorials that I was uh doing, I would love to do kind of a full featured tutorial on maybe multiple videos on how to use it and how to use it with different like devices. And I don't know, I don't have a bunch of different devices, but like I can cover what I have now and then as I get other things. But yeah, there's like multiple ways you can import them into like multi-QX, and um, that's super cool. So yeah, I'm really like floored by like what I was able to get. Yeah, and it's definitely not a Harman curve. I actually stopped using a Harman curve years ago because it was just I got tired of. I didn't like it. I did not like it. Also, thank you, Siphonics. She's doing good now. She's home. But yeah, it was a scary couple of weeks because she was like in the hospital and then out of the hospital and then back in the hospital. So appreciate it.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
You know, we just had this. Willie brings this up. We just had this conversation earlier. A
Yeah, we
similar.
did. We did.
This is
Earlier
Nolan's weird
in there,
talking about
yeah.
Christopher Nolan. He thinks 3D is a gimmick, but loves variable aspect ratio. Doesn't like 3D audio either, which seems unfathomable to me. And that's what I said. He views like Atmos as a gimmick, right? I think he
Mhm.
also views surround sound as a gimmick for the most part.
Yeah.
But to me, what's a gimmick? Switching aspect ratios, shooting in IMAX. Like these are all like it shoot the whole movie in IMAX or don't shoot. You know what I mean? Like pick one.
Yeah.
Like, and I get like IMAX has a different like if it's actual true projected 70 millimeter, it looks different, has better like it's just a different beast altogether.
Yeah.
But it's not feasible to shoot a whole movie like that on actual film. And he's
Mhm.
also refuses to shoot digitally. So there's this whole yeah. I mean, he's kind of that's a topic for a completely other live stream. I think we even like when I was in Joe and Tell's Daily Hi-Fi podcast at one point, I talked about Christopher Nolan and how he has a hearing problem. And that was I
Yeah.
think Joe even made a little clip of it and put it like, yeah, it's crazy to me. It's like, yeah, Willie says the same thing. Stick to one AR. I will say it doesn't like I'm kind of a purist. I want to see things and hear things the way the director intended, but
Mhm.
sometimes I'm just like this this director's out of his mind, you
Yeah.
know. James Cameron's another one that and Peter Jackson, they're doing a similar thing, not the same thing that like George Lucas kind of did with Star Wars where they're re-releasing these movies like Aliens is a controversial 4K Blu-ray that has used AI remastering technology with like noise reduction and edge enhancement and things. It does not look like the movie would have had it been like at release in the was it 80s, like late 80s, right?
Yeah.
It looks kind of pristine and new, and it's like, okay, but he's trying to make it look like as if you were to shoot it today with the technology that we have now. Whereas like, but these things should just stand up to the test of time. Just
Mhm.
make it look like it would have then without doing all this extra, this extra stuff, and like the 4K Blu-ray of Terminator 2.
Yeah, isn't that like one of the worst transfers
I bought it for
ever?
$7 because I was curious.
Yeah, yeah.
It is literally like the worst version. They even made CGI changes to some of the effect shots.
Oh,
Which there was one that I was like, okay, that's fine. Like I don't really care. It was when the truck dives over the thing, like
uh,
the freeway when he's chasing John Connor.
right.
One of the windshields pops out, and then like you see it, and then the next shot it's back in. So they just digitally added that, like where it never pops out. And so because remember the T1000 pops up from the driver's seat and pushes it out with his hand.
Yeah.
So like they just put that back in. I'm like, okay, cool. They did, but then that's what he said. That's the only thing we changed. And it's like, well, okay, you did a Arnold Schwarzenegger head replacement here because that was obviously a stunt guy before. There's like videos online comparing the two, but I just thought it was
Yeah.
funny. I was like, you didn't need to do any of that.
No, not at all. Stop
Like
messing
all
with your stuff.
that and the whole Ike, welcome Ike. He said, so it just made me laugh. An intern definitely worked on the Terminator transfer. Yes, yes. Um, yeah, Van Gool brings up a good point. I'm like you with T2. I bought it to see what it was like. The prison is to white and blue with no facial detail. Yeah, here's the other thing. The color correction's all like off, right? Like they've teal and oranged it. It just changes the original vibe of the movie. It's kind of like if you go back and watch like Big Trouble in Little China, from the 80s. Imagine John Carpenter remastering that on 4K and then saying, you know what? I've changed my mind. I don't want any grain. I want it to be completely like flawless. And we're going to teal and we're going to change the color to make it look modern. It's like, but it's not modern. We all know it came out in the 80s. It's kind of like
Yeah, there's no need.
you're doing plastic surgery on something that doesn't need to be done, Uh yeah, I'm a purist in that regard. I just want give me the original in the best quality possible. I'll deal with the grain. I don't care. I like
Yeah.
I always cite the original Ghostbusters as like an amazing transfer on 4K Blu-ray. Grain
Mhm.
and all, it looks amazing. Weird Science is another one. Looks amazing on 4K Blu-ray and HDR and all that stuff. I guess one could argue that HDR is changing the intent a bit, but if it's properly done, it shouldn't really be noticeable,
Yeah.
right? Like it shouldn't really call attention to itself. Um, it's when like they really overdo it, and you're like, that was not like that.
Right.
So yeah, like, and we're always gonna have people that are going to like mess around with that kind of stuff. Same with like Atmos remixes, and I think that you know, you start straying far away from like what the original version was. Give me the original version too, then. Don't pull a George Lucas, be like, well, this is my vision and this is what I want. And, that's a bad George Lucas impression, but you get what I mean. He's
Yeah.
he's kind of a character in and of himself. So,
Yeah, I don't really get the whole grain hating aspect. Because I mean it's like it was made in a time where you made a movie on film. That was the only medium that you could use at the time.
yeah.
And back from decades ago, it was the only medium. So why act like it didn't come from an era that you could only shoot on film?
Yeah.
Like preserve the historical aspect of that film by,
Yeah.
keeping the grain in. But, now do another scan of those negatives, sure. So then you can make it as big as you want and have it nice 4K crispy detail. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
But don't get rid of the grain.
Yeah.
Yeah,
My wife and I just talked about this actually, because we were talking about ET.
Mhm.
And I was like, yeah, I actually have the 4K Blu-ray, and I was like, thankfully, Steven Spielberg has like completely like done away with his special edition that came out. You remember when they're like, we've supplemented ET with some CGI, and
They
the
have
guns are now walkie
walkie-talkies.
talkies, and
Yeah.
he basically came out and said, look, that version is not what my original intent was. That version will still exist on the current formats that it's out on, but like we're not going to be doing anything with that. We're going back to the original like 19, was it seven, wasn't 78, it was like 82.
82, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like 1982 version. Um, and I'm like, oh thank God. Like I just
Yeah.
give me that. And I will say like the 4K transfer on that is great. The reds look a little funky on the jacket at the end. I think they did like some digital masking to I don't it just it's
Oh.
always the end with like in the van spoilers if you haven't seen ET. Um if you had 40 years to see it. So
Yeah.
wow. 40 years.
42.
That's crazy. 42, yeah. But yeah, she's like, I haven't seen it in years. So like we were talking about rewatching it. But yeah, I think, there comes a point where it's like, how different is it from the original? Like the DTSX track on ET is a good kind of medium, but what's also included is the original mono or the stereo track.
Mhm.
So like you have both options, and I think that that's important. I think I
Yes.
am what I am. I am that I am. Sorry, says the same thing. They have the ability to offer both options. I can see why T2 got hate, but I honestly think it looked great. And same goes with the Abyss. I will agree with the Abyss. I thought the Abyss looked great. The T2 they did too much with the noise reduction. The people
Mhm.
just looked too artificial and weird. His leather jacket, like the creases in the jacket, actually just looked like blobs. Like kind of
Yeah.
like that thing where you once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Mhm.
Whereas like the Abyss, by comparison, that it was much more lightly applied. I think it
Mhm.
still looks a little too digital for my personal taste. I would love to see like a version with all the grain.
Yeah.
It's funny they leave all that in, or they take all that away, but they leave the lens. I don't know if you've seen that. There's a shot in the Abyss
Yeah, where he
where you see
cleans
the
off the
guy
wipes
clean
off the
the
lens, yeah.
camera lens. I was like, you leave all that, okay? But no, I think it looks great. True Lies, unfortunately, is beyond like garbage. Like it's on par to me with as being as bad as T2. Unfortunately,
Mm.
um, they really went heavy with the AI on that one. But yeah, I think like having both versions, which let's be honest, there's like 800 versions of Terminator 2 out. There've been so many
Yeah.
releases over the years. They've really milked um, that franchise for what it like for all it's worth, basically at this point. But yeah, it's kind of like just give me like a good like quality. Like I love watching old movies that were done properly. Like Real Genius is another one from the 80s.
Mhm.
Super grainy, but man, does it look good. Like it I actually love like I love when a movie looks like that. Like you could see all the detail because there's no way to get rid of pretty much any of that grain without removing some detail from the image. And I'd
Yeah.
rather you just give it to me, like give me all the
Raw.
grain. Give it to me raw, man. Yeah, and that's actually a very good point. Willie brings up 4K scans from the original negative presumably have less grain than original release by default because they may be the first time we've ever got to see a first generation copy of the movie. Yeah, we don't know what they used.
True. Yeah.
If we saw the movie in the theater back in the 90s, projection on film, you know, we definitely saw generational loss.
Mhm.
Um, there, we saw like scratches and every dust and everything. Um,
Right.
that was
I'm o
probably
I'm okay with getting scratches and dust,
yeah, yeah.
but leave the grain.
Yeah, leave the grain. But I think what he's saying is those are already dupes of a negative,
Mhm.
right? So like they weren't as sharp or crisp as like a first, like a, especially the original camera negative, like from the camera after it was developed. If it's
Yeah.
properly maintained, doing a restoration on that is like highly preferable because we're actually seeing the film in like its best quality that will ever be possible pretty much without maybe going in and scanning and
Yeah.
8K or whatnot. And there does become a diminishing returns point there, but if you get at least scan in 4K, you'll retain the majority of that detail unless the negative's in really, really bad shape. I
Right.
used to like want to be like a film preservationist.
Yeah.
When I was growing, I mean, I was still like, if someone was like, "Hey, we're opening this up near you, like, you should come and interview," I'd be like, "Okay," like, what do you do all day? I make sure, like it just, I, I was like, I don't let people touch film with their bare hands, first of all, but yeah, it's really like a fascinating process. If anybody ever like, I know we're getting like really kind of out there with the discussion, but it's kind of all ties together with like, you know, just like audio, bad video, poorly remastered. But I don't know if you can even call it a remaster. Um, Poorly remastered video it can take me out of the experience. The same as like a poorly mixed or like an over the top mixed Atmos track, right?
Mhm.
Like Twister is a great example. Like I love Twister. It's a little too busy. I
Yeah.
keep saying that.
I
Um,
know. I really can't wait till it comes out because I do
yeah,
want to
I'm curious.
compare the turbine version
Hmm.
to the new 4K release, just to see if they have remixed it or remastered it in any way, or if they're just using that same mix that the turbine edition has.
Yeah,
Curious.
curious. So going back to actually, so we're gonna kind of wrap things up because we're almost at 2 hours here. But I kind of want to bring this up too,
Yeah.
and it's something I think about because again, it's all kind of ties together. Like we're kind of talking about the same things anyway. So Willie brings up exactly. I think the best first run movie screenings were at least 2 generations removed from the negative. So 2 times extra grain added, grain that was never intended. So that to me begs the question when they go back to remastering these, right? They're scanning that original camera negative. It's at a quality level that we've never seen before, right? Like there was a whole thing back in the day when they remastered Wizard of Oz where they were remastering it and one of the people noticed that the Tin Man has a little rivet right at the center of his forehead that was never seen before on previous versions because they were always generational lost versions of it.
Yeah.
So my question, I guess, to Elon and even the you people in the comments, if we're seeing something like the first generation negative, right?
Mhm.
If you could see, say, wires holding up a spaceship, if you could see, the wire holding up somebody that's supposed to be flying through a scene, as an example,
Right.
do you think it's okay to remove that wire? Because maybe they made the movie that this is provided if the director was still alive, right?
Mhm.
Maybe they made the movie originally knowing that this is going to be a generation or two that you're going to see in the theater, that wire will disappear because as the generations go down, you like lose detail.
Yeah.
Do you think it's okay to remove those wires, or do you think just leave them in, don't touch it? We're talking about like really, really like there's some old movies from like 20s and 30s, especially where
Mhm.
you could see all of it. Like you could see, you know, people in the background that weren't supposed to be there. There's maybe like a cup on the ground or something. This predates
Yeah.
Game of Thrones Cupgate or Starbucks Gate, Coffee Gate or whatever.
Right.
Um, this is way back. This is like photo bombing before there was photo bombing.
Mhm. Um, Gosh, that's a good question because you like I mentioned previously, keep the grain in because it's historical. Um, but at the same time, I don't mind scratches being removed in a 4K remaster.
Yeah.
So I would honestly say, in my mind, it's okay, because if I see The Wire just clear as day, I mean, yeah, I would chuckle at it, being like,
Yeah.
"Oh,
Yeah, look at
there's
that.
that." The director probably didn't intend to have the audience see that.
Yeah.
So if it is something that may distract me from the story, sure, I would say then it's fair game to remove
Yeah.
it.
And I think we're talking too about very light, like we're not talking about CGIing anything, right? We're not
No.
talking about like, oh, that gun is now a balloon or something. You know,
Yeah.
we're saying if there's a wire holding up a spaceship that you can see because the detail is so much better, should we leave it in? You know, Willie says that's an excellent movie moral dilemma. Not sure what the answer is. I don't know either. Like part of me says just leave it in. Just leave it in.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't, like, turn off the movie because of it.
Right,
Like I
right.
said,
Yeah.
I would probably chuckle a little bit, but yeah,
Yeah.
it wouldn't ruin the experience.
Yeah. And I
But if they had the money and the extra time to paint out little
yeah.
flaws like that, sure,
Yeah. I mean
whatever.
how hard is it these days to paint out a wire in After Effects?
Super
It's like
easy.
super easy.
Yeah, with AI
Um
technology now, they just
yeah.
whoop,
You
and
you
it's
wouldn't
gone.
even really need to do much.
Yeah.
So I think like yeah, I mean the purist in me, it's like we've never seen a movie at this quality level before.
Mhm. Sure.
So, you know, speaking of quality level, I sent my I actually kind of want to share this because we're talking about remastering and this is when 4K does you no favors. Let me see if I can
Yeah.
bring up my photos real quick cuz I was watching this movie the other day. Speaking of James Cameron, I was watching Titanic.
Mhm.
Um just cuz I had it on, I wanted something on. Let me share my screen here.
I want it on.
All right. Where is it to present? There we go.
Present.
All right. So you guys should be able to see this here. So this is just a scene from Titanic. See if I can
Mhm.
make this full screen. There we go.
Titani.
All right. So I saw this movie in the theater with my grandma a couple times, and I never noticed this before, but Billy Zane is bald, right? So
Right.
if you look, you can. It's hard to see, but look at this wig line right here that is so apparent in 4K on a big screen that you just see it, and you can't unsee it once you notice it, and it's in every
Right.
shot.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is hilarious to me. I sent this to my sister because like 4K is not doing him any favors here. So
Right.
it just it cracked me up. That's a picture of my cat. But it cracked me up and I was just like, I have to share it. I have to share it. So here, well, there we go. And we're back. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because it kind of ties into
Yeah.
what we're talking about, and I thought it was funny. Um, it's it's kind of like okay, it does fall under that category. Do you go in and painstakingly? I mean, that would be a lot harder than removing a wire, right? Like,
Oh, yeah, for
and
sure.
we actually see it all the time. I can't remember what movie it was recently where, oh, I think it was actually Breaking Bad.
Oh,
There was
yeah.
a scene where he had like a beard, like it was obviously not, like it wasn't his real like goatee.
Yeah.
And when they showed a close up, you could see the actual like where the glue was, but also like the line, the little, I don't know if you call that line there where like, but basically it's like, it's kind of like opaque with a bunch of holes in it so they can blend
Yeah.
it. And it was just like
Right.
sticking out. And I was like, I don't think we were supposed to see that.
Yeah, I remember I commented about that um, when I reviewed Braveheart and Gladiator on
Mm,
4K. That previously I had never noticed several shots in Braveheart that were clearly out of focus. They were like they're
Yeah.
real quick shots, but yeah, just but that at the same time, like that's just another scenario where it's just part of the era. It was done in the mid '90s, so
Part of the
they
experience.
they
Yeah.
didn't they didn't have the technology that we have now that allows you to have such good, amazingly clear monitors watching what's happening going on the in the camera, because if they would have had that back then, they would have been like, "Oh, that shot's out of focus. Can we redo that?"
Yeah.
But, it's just part of how it was, and,
Yeah. Yeah.
just live with it. But it was interesting how being in 4K allowed you to notice little details like that more. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
I wasn't, like, mad at it or anything.
yeah. Well, it's just like that. Like I'm not taken out of the movie by it, but like it is once I notice it, it's like, oh wow, okay, that makes sense. His widow's peak also changes length on some shots where to like go
Yeah.
further. It's like those were different days, obviously, and they didn't nail it. Um, yeah, I
Right.
just thought that was funny. I wanted to share that. But yeah, I think we kind of went off topic there a little bit, but it does tie in to the whole experience of immersion. If we're talking about immersion, um, you know, audio is part of it. Audio is
Mhm.
a huge part of it to me. It's at least 50%, if not more, for me. But video also does play a role.
Mhm.
I think I can be less forgiving if something maybe we talk about grain, like I love grain. If something's super grainy or something slightly like a shot's out of focus or something, I can be more forgiving of that. But if the audio is
Yeah.
really bad, it's same with like a YouTube video. I mean,
Mhm.
you guys go to watch a YouTube video or something and we've all done this where we go to click on a video and the audio is really bad or the person's yelling and it's clipping or you turn it off. Like you don't want to listen to it,
Yeah.
right? And so like but if the video is kind of bad, you're like, "Oh, well, I need to watch this tutorial on how to, replace a circuit breaker or something."
Mhm.
Like it doesn't really matter that the video's awful, but I can still see, but I can hear them fine. It's okay,
Yeah.
you know. Like so, I think overall, like the thing that kills the experience for me most is when it's either like we said, it's not done well enough, or it's overdone to the point where it distracts from the actual movie.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's all I have to
Yeah.
say about that.
Um,
Oh,
Jose
what?
brought up a good point.
Yeah,
Scratches, film in particular, scratches, glitches,
yeah,
etc., are intentional in Fight Club, for example. So yeah, that's obviously the director's intent. That's
mm-hmm,
again, that's David Fincher, I believe,
yep,
who is very meticulous. So yeah, that totally makes sense to keep all the scratches and glitches in for that movie. Um,
yeah, and the
so
and the
yeah,
cigarette burns. Willie said,
right,
yeah, and then how Tyler Durden will just show up for
yeah,
one frame.
bloop.
Yep, super great.
Yeah,
Well, just like all of the shots in was it The Social Network, right?
mm.
I don't know if you I don't Elon, may not be aware of this, but as a David Fincher fan myself, I think he shot that entire movie. They made the decision to shoot it all at the same f-stop. So all at like
Oh,
f2.8 or f2.0 or something like that. The whole
wow,
movie. Yeah. It's in one of the behind the scenes documentaries. And so like, obviously you can't really I mean with today's technology, you can shoot and then change focus later. There's actually cameras that do that.
yeah,
Um, but like, that's a creative artistic decision that I wouldn't want someone down the road coming like, well, we figured out a way to make everything in focus. It's like, no, that's not, we don't want
yeah,
that. Um, and Willie also brings up a good point for me. Grain and 24 frames per second is the heart of what made film so magical in the first place. And I agree,
yeah,
we could do a whole live stream on that 24 versus high frame rate,
48, yeah,
48, 60, 120, 240, whatever. Um, because I I'm in the 24 camp myself. I've seen
Me
stuff
too.
that doesn't. I have not seen anything that really makes me go, you know what? I like this better. I really think Jim and I Man looked better than the 24 frames per. Jim and I Man looks so weird.
I always disable motion smoothing on
Mhm,
TVs. Can't stand it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Which is also funny because I think you and I have talked about this, where for games we typically want a higher frame rate,
Yes.
right? Because it's an interactive thing. We're trying to
Mhm.
reduce the latency between what we have in our hands as a controller, keyboard, and mouse to like what's happening on screen.
Mhm.
Um, but
Especially
also
with
for
like a first person shooter or something, you wanna
yeah,
have the most detail possible so you're not
right.
missing
And
anything.
right. And the thing is motion detail is also big because if you have too much, like if it's games like 30 frames per second, you're going to have far less motion clarity if you're
Yeah.
panning the camera left or right,
Yeah.
or panning your character left and right, versus if you're at 60 or 120, you're going to have much less, you're going to have more frames in between.
Mhm.
So like you have more clarity. And then if if you're up really high, you turn off motion blur, and then suddenly it's like, there's no there's no like still frames in between. That's really the problem with like 30 FPS video games, is like you disable motion blur and suddenly you can kind of start noticing those picture, like it just, things don't like feel quite as well. It actually can cause motion sickness.
Yeah.
um
Sure.
so yeah, like a high frame rate video games is completely different. um
Mhm.
but not every game needs that either.
Right.
So if it's more like a movie, 30 is probably okay. But yeah, I'm with you. Maybe we'll do that one day. I don't know how many people would watch it, but just kind of talking about, you know, point counterpoint, like high frame rate cinema, yay or nay. I think it has its place. Um, but everything out there so far has not been great.
Yeah.
I could see some nature documentaries and stuff like that. That would be really cool. But like
Yeah,
otherwise,
as if you're there,
right. Otherwise, it
seeing it
just
with
looks.
your own eyeballs.
I mean, I don't know if I'm wrong, but I remember seeing I saw all three Hobbit movies in 48 frames per second because I
I
was
only saw the first one.
I was determined to love it. I just could never bring myself to it because at the end of the day, guess what? It just felt like a bunch of actors standing around on a set to me,
Yeah,
and the sets looked like sets. That was the problem. It looked
right,
fake.
right.
It looked. You know what? I always reminded. It reminds me of. It looks like an SNL skit.
Right.
It like,
That's
yeah.
that's not cinema.
No, the only thing that looked good in The Hobbit to me were the flyover shots when they were on the, like, it just, that made you feel like you were flying along with them.
Mhm.
But then when they were actually down, like when you're like they're in Bilbo's house in Bag End, you're just like, all right, that's fake. That's fake. Like you like things just look
Right.
wrong. It
Yeah.
looks yeah. So anything, I think that's a good place to end it. Would you say? We
I think
can
so.
end it there. Yeah, we didn't think we talked about as much as we can talk today for now.
Uh.
Yeah. Just gonna go stare at the ceiling up here, like, oh, what's that? No. But yeah,
Yeah.
we'll be back again next
Well,
week. Oh,
the
good.
the
Yeah, yeah.
the just to end, if I can find it, it was towards the top. Um,
You just gotta do that. I start the end of the stream. I'm like, yeah, thanks guys for joining us and blah blah blah. Elon's like, no.
uh, well, just in a nutshell. Here it is. Joel Gonzalez said, "Looks like physical disc content is not dead, like some were saying, at least not yet." And yeah, I'd have to agree. I mean, maybe it does have its heyday and comes back just like vinyl has. Um, but as far as I'm concerned, the fact that my affiliate link alone has had 175 plus purchases of Gravity in the last a week or so when I posted it, tells me that there's a lot of physical media fans out there still. And because of its success already, I think that is going to be a good gauge in, are we going to get a 4K remaster or not? And I think because of the popularity of this Blu-ray Atmos version, yeah, I'm pretty sure the sales that Warner Brothers is getting from just this one movie being re-released on Blu-ray, it's definitely going to be a testament to Warner Brothers to um, put some money into a real good 4K remaster. They may actually already be doing it. I did hear, or maybe I saw a comment or an article or something saying that Alfonso Cuarón, the director, um, hasn't released a 4K version yet because it just wasn't up to his level that he
Yeah.
wanted it to look like. So apparently it's already in process. So who knows when that might actually come out. But yeah, physical media is not dead, folks. And I'm
Not
here
yet.
for it. So
Not yet.
that's my ending spiel.
Well, I will say on that note that we live in a time. No, we live in a society, Jerry. Um, we seem to live in a time where clickbaity articles, anytime something happens, there's a sudden urge to just go, the death of this thing, or does this mean this, or does that, like, I mean, when Best Buy announced that they were like ending the sale of physical media in all their stores and on their website, I mean, how many articles did you read? How many YouTube videos did you see that was like, is this the end of physical media? The death of physical media and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I think it's quick. People are quick to do that, even if it's kind of a considered clickbaity, kind of like, oh man, let's really harp on the negative here. They
Yeah.
kind of jump the gun to get the views or get whatever. I'm not singling out anybody. I was just like, I even had a friend that was like, oh yeah, man, physical media is dead. I was like, did you read that somewhere? Because like,
Yeah.
that's like, I don't think you could say that just because Best Buy, like if Amazon said we're stopping carrying physical media, then I'd be worried,
Yeah.
So I'll just say that, like, I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. People have been saying it for years and years and years that physical media is dead, streaming's going to take over. I don't see that happening anytime soon.
And yet Blu-ray players and 4K Blu-ray players are still selling.
What? It's the end of the stream. I could say the F word right now. You can always say the F word. But yeah, I'll just leave it there because I still buy physical media myself. I don't buy as many as I used to just because money.
Yeah.
you know, all this stuff is not cheap. Although I don't miss the days where I had to spend $70 on a laser disc. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So on that note, I think we're going to end it there, guys. We will see you here again next week, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks. You're cool. All of you.
All of you. We'll see you later, guys.
Bye.